And thank you for joining us at Starting and Growing Resilient Communities. This is our third session, Launching an ACEs Initiative. I'm Ingrid Cochran. I am your Midwest and Tennessee Community Facilitator for ACEs Connection. And so today we're going to be discussing launching an ACEs initiative. Our panelists today are myself, Linda Menaul with Raising Resilient Oklahomans, Kate Reed from Kankakee Iroquois Cares, and then Sissy White, who is our Northeast Community Facilitator. I would like to take this time to also invite everyone who is not already a member to join us at www.acesconnection.com. Let me go over a few housekeeping rules. So first, there's no need to raise your hand. Please use the Q&A icon for any questions. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. This session is being recorded, so it will be available for future viewing. And then, of course, any questions or concerns that are not addressed now can be addressed during, you can address it online at acesconnection.com or via email. So acesconnection.com is a social network that recognizes the impact of a wide variety of ACEs or adverse childhood experiences in shaping adult behavior and health, and that promotes trauma-informed and resilience-building practices and policies in families, organizations, systems, and communities. We are a social network. People like to call us the Facebook for the ACEs movement. We were launched in 2012 by our founder, Jane Stevens, who is a health science and technology journalist. She realized the need to educate the public about ACEs science and created this network for people interested in this newly emerging field. Over the last 6 years, membership has grown to 30,000 people in more than 40 countries. We just recently reached that 30,000 mark. We are in about 150 cities, counties, and regions within this country, and we have community sites that reflect those regions. That number continues to grow. We are also generously funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the California Endowment, so that the tools, resources, and support that you receive on ACEs Connection remains free to members. I want to take this time to give a call to action to our members who are not currently in a community, that you either join a community that is represented in your local area, or you start your own community, your own online ACEs initiative at acesconnection.com. In the past two sections, I talked about how it was important that we reached our goal of 300 by the end of March. We were able to reach that goal, so thank you so much for joining the communities. And so this is what we're going to be discussing today. We have our series overview. We'll discuss tips for launching an initiative. We'll hear the stories of Raising Resilient Oklahomans and Kankakee Iroquois Cares, and then we'll talk about growing resilient communities. So this is the series overview. So far in January, we did an overview over the overall series and an introduction to the site. In February, last month, we talked about mission, value statements, and creating norms. And there was a lot of positive feedback on that second session. And so again, today, we're going to be talking about launching your own ACEs initiative. Next month, April, we'll be discussing Become Trauma-Informed. In May, we'll talk about how to tell your community story. And then in June, we'll talk about developing leadership within your ACEs initiative. Future sessions, we will have a session each month this year. Future sessions will be outlined in our April session. So first, tips for launching an initiative. We talked a little bit about how to get started before in our second series when we discussed mission and value statements. So, sorry, about that. Sorry, you guys, excuse my crazy dog. So first, let's talk about knowing the science. When we think about what you need to know the background, the research. And so it's good for communities to have a learning collaborative so that you are always up on the science that goes along with ACEs. You also need to be able to know your audience. So as you create your mission and value statements, make sure that you are outlining who you're serving. And you need to know the needs of who you're serving so that you can craft a good launch for your community. Next, you need to know your community itself. Here, I'm in Tennessee. One of the things that we are concerned with here in Tennessee are our health outcomes. We have some of the poorest health outcomes in the country. We also, depending on the area, have issues around opioid addiction, and we have a low educational outcomes. And so those are the areas that our initiative needs to address. You need to be able to frame your message. So as you come together and you decide on your mission and your vision and your values, then you need to be able to craft a message that allows for your community to understand and then translate that into action. So a lot of times we give out a lot of information about ACEs and trauma, but it is not delivered in a way that allows for people to change what they are hearing, what they're understanding into action within their community. So you need to understand how to frame your message, and that requires research. You need to find the best structure. I am in a collective impact here in Nashville, Tennessee, but some might need to be nonprofits. Some may need to be in a collaborative or cooperative. And so you need to understand what the best structure is for you. You need to find your key players in your community. So one of the best entities to be involved in your movement is your local health department, also your local school district. And so once you find your key players and get them at the table, you can have a more comprehensive movement that is reaching everyone within the community. And then of course, you definitely need to have your funders. Once you create your mission and vision, that will help you to align with funders that are aligned with your mission and your vision. So let's go back. One of the things that a lot of people miss out on at the very beginning is having a strong foundation before they get started. And so it's going to look like, of course, having that steering committee, hashing through your mission, vision, and values, but also having a name for your initiative that allows for people to really understand what you're doing. So I love Raising Resilient Oklahomans because it allows you to understand that you are focused on resiliency. And so once you define your mission, then you should be able to have a good name for your initiative. Creating a logo and buying a domain, these are things that you may or may not have to do. If you already have an organization that has a logo that's existing, or you can use the structure that's already existing. So a lot of here in Nashville, a lot of our emails go through our health department, so they have nashville.gov. But if you don't have that, then it's very easy to get a domain that usually costs $10 to $15 a year, which allows you to have email addresses that are associated with that. There's also ways to get websites that are paid on a monthly basis. So these are things that you can do in the beginning without not a lot of funding. And then of course you have to create social media accounts. And so you need to be able to communicate in lots of different ways, and ACEs movement requires that you're able to reach the masses. And in this day and age, it is a requirement to have a social media account. So Facebook, Twitter, and then of course, ACEs Connection. And with that, you need to develop a marketing strategy. Who do you need to reach? How are you going to reach them? And a good rule of thumb, especially when we think about the public health sphere, if you can get to 1 in 7 people knowing about your initiative, then that will be a catalyst for you to reach the larger community. And so that might be a good long-term goal in your strategic plan, to have 1 in 7 of the people in your area to know about ACEs. And then once you have those things set up, then your next step is to teach. And this is how you're going to reach the people in your community. I'm a certified trainer here for the state of Tennessee, and I have done trainings with our curriculum in someone's home. Anytime I have the opportunity to train someone, then I do, and that allows me to grow our network. So each time I reach someone, I train someone, I get their email address, so that we can add it to our listserv, remain in contact with them, and then that listserv just continues to grow and grow with each training opportunity. One model that people like to use is the train the trainer. This, here in Tennessee, we do this quarterly through our state agency, Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth, and they have quarterly train the trainers where they give a certification in ACEs training that allows those individuals to go out and train within the community. And that's just one way. But definitely you want to also have strategic educational events. You can do lunch and learns, you can do free events at schools with teachers. You also want to reach out to guest speakers. You may not have the know-how in your local community because ACEs may not be as known. So you might want to reach out to people around the nation who can come and teach your steering committee, teach your teachers, your local teachers, teach your law enforcement about ACEs. And then that way you have basically someone who's a subject matter expert to come in and teach. And then when you get to a certain level, you can do conferences, which, it's more bang for your buck. You get a lot of people together and you train them about certain topics. And then it allows for them to network amongst themselves. And then again, that helps to grow your listserv. And so these are just some tips for launching an initiative. Next, we're going to go to Linda Menaul. She's going to talk about Raising Resilient Oklahomans, which is an online community here at ACEs Connection.
Okay, well, hi. As Ingrid said, my name is Linda Menaul. By way of introduction, background, I am a retired educator, having spent most of my professional career working with special populations in the public school system here in Oklahoma. Currently, I'm working with the Potts Family Foundation as Director of Communications and Program Support, and one of my responsibilities here was to set up and serve as the community manager for our Raising Resilient Oklahomans community on ACEs Connection. Next slide, please. A little bit more background which might help explain how we got where we are now. The Potts Family Foundation is a relatively speaking small family foundation that has as its primary mission to support nonprofit capacity building and to support sustainable early childhood initiatives. And we define early childhood as pre-birth to 5. We are located in Oklahoma City, and although we are small, we do maintain a statewide focus. We believe that our strengths lie in our ability to build networks and to act as a catalyst and facilitator for advocacy on behalf of Oklahoma's youngest citizens who have no voice. We do this through the OK 25 by 25 Early Childhood Coalition, which is made up of our foundation's board of directors, our OK CEOs, I'll explain later, dozens of allied organizations, and our Early Childhood Legislative Caucus. I'm going to skip that next bullet and address it in a little bit later. Next slide, please. The OK CEOs, or Oklahoma Champions for Early Opportunities, was actually our first vehicle to get our message out that early investment in kids would provide the greatest return on dollars spent. In about 2011, we recruited key business leaders and developed presentations they could make to civic, faith-based, and other groups using the latest brain research and economic development information about early childhood investment. This program is still in place with about 60 leaders spread across the state. And about 3 years ago, through an even bigger vision, our statewide OK 25 by 25 Early Childhood Coalition was formally announced. A group of about 60 allied organizations agreed to be a part of the coalition. These organizations represent major state agencies, our research universities, foundations, and nonprofit service providers who all share a common mission and focus on childhood well-being. We collaborate with each other, and many, if not most, are focused on treating, preventing, and ending childhood trauma in our state. Next slide. Next slide. About the same time as a part of the coalition, we began the formation of an early childhood legislative caucus, which would be bipartisan and involve members from both chambers of our state legislature. Legislators in Oklahoma are part-time, and the session basically runs from February through May, although policy research and development continue much of the year. From years 1 through 3, which is the current year, the number of legislators who have committed to sponsoring and supporting early childhood policies has grown from 20 to 42, which represents about 30% of all of our legislators. We work with them on policy development, research, and educational presentations. And during the 4 months of the session, we hold lunch and learns with speakers who provide background information relative to early childhood issues to help these policymakers in their work. Each year, we're learning better how to legally and strategically navigate this territory. Some of our key outcomes with the legislature is that we have sponsored 2 interim studies, one in the House of Representatives in 2017 and one in the Senate in 2018 on adverse childhood experiences and protective factors. We also saw the passage of a bill last year to establish a 3-year task force to study best practices in trauma-informed care. This task force brings key agency heads and other experts to the table, working together in a way that wouldn't happen otherwise. We also have a pending bill that would require teacher prep programs to include trauma-informed instruction in their curriculum for teacher certification. Stepping back to that part that I skipped there, our Path to ACEs connection escalated when we were introduced to the documentary film Resilience, the Biology of Stress and the Science of Hope. The film really resonated with us due to the dismal statistics of childhood well-being in our state. The handle OK 25 by 25 sets a goal that Oklahoma will move out of the bottom 25 states and into the top 25 states in major statistics of childhood well-being by the year 2025. We are in the bottom, sadly, bottom 10 in far too many areas, and in some measures of adverse childhood experiences, we actually lead the nation, or are tied with a couple of other states in leading the nation in percentage of population with 4 or more ACEs. Therefore, we made the decision to purchase the license to show the film in 10 communities and held our first screening on October 12, 2017. We followed the screening with the cross-disciplinary panel discussion and audience Q&A, and that has been our model ever since. As of today, we've screened the film 110 times through our office to nearly 7,000 Oklahomans. It's been in such demand that we purchased a second license in June so we could be 2 places at once. We also know of at least a dozen other communities and or groups that have purchased their own license to show the documentary. Next slide, please. Last year, about this time, the Potts Family Foundation and our partners held a statewide conference to bring professionals from several key disciplines together and introduce ACEs science on a larger scale. We brought in Dr. Rob Anda and educator Susan Craig as keynote speakers. We hoped for attendance of maybe 300, and by the day of the event, we had maxed out the venue at 500 and were turning people away. We titled the event, Raising Resilient Oklahomans, and that has certainly stuck with us. On this slide, I have listed the different presentations, including the 2 keynotes. These were all recorded on video, and you're welcome to access them on our Raising Resilient Oklahomans community site under the Resources tab, or if the slides are made available to you, their hyperlinks are included. This conference became a huge springboard for launching the ACEs Connections statewide site, which we as a foundation were invited by Jane Stevens and Elizabeth Pruitt to do. I had been using the site as a resource and was so impressed by the generous nature of the sharing community. I was also aware that there was no Oklahoma presence, and they were very aware of what we were doing here. They somehow have a way of finding out what's going on. Working with then community facilitator Maggie, Dana, and Alicia, I think, we had our site up and going by late April, and we've grown to our current membership of 124. I continue to be impressed with the wealth of information, research-based, and anecdotal stories about trauma, resilience, and hope. Next slide. Briefly, some of our results to date. We have 2 formal resilience communities that have been formed that we know of. Resilient Payne County and Ardmore Behavioral Health Collaborative each now have their own ACEs Connection site. The Potts Family Foundation also gave out 5 $1,000 challenge grants last fall to communities who had pulled a team together and were ready to take the next steps in planning. And we will do at least 5 more grants again this spring. We're excited that our new governor has created, for the first time ever, a cabinet position for human services and early childhood initiatives. We had human services and health, but now health will be separate and early childhood initiatives has been added. And his wife, who has made brain health her primary focus, will host and moderate a panel for a big screening of Resilience documentary in Tulsa later this month. We're also looking at having a convening of any and all communities and groups who are working on resilience building in Stillwater at the end of April, hosted by Resilient Payne County. We are also co-sponsoring the first faith-based trauma-informed resilience conference in early April with the Interfaith Alliance and Oklahoma Conference of Churches. Also, various state agencies, including our State Department of Education, have held trauma, resilience, hope type conferences over the past year, with many more to come. Next slide. What's ahead of us often changes with the opportunities provided. We're working toward planning a workshop with targeted communities sometime this fall. We are also working with the state's task force on trauma-informed care. We continue to resource and network emerging resilient communities in our state. As far as the ACEs Connection site, I am continually learning how to make better use of the tools and resources. My goal is to encourage wider participation from the community members in posting their successes, using the calendar to promote their events, and better use of the tracker tool. It's a huge job for one person, so I encourage you to learn from me and develop a team, which I have not done as successfully, who will help take responsibility. In my entire professional career, I've never seen such a wealth of knowledge, experience, and information sharing as exists and continues to grow in ACEs Connection. And I am grateful to Jane Stevens and the team she has put together, including my facilitator, Ingrid, for making this available to all of us. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Linda. We are going to move on to Kankakee Iroquois Cares. I've been told that I was saying it incorrectly. And it's going to be Kate Reed, who is their community manager.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Linda, just for sharing the exciting and encouraging work that you're doing. And Ingrid and Jane and everyone behind the scenes, thank you so much for your support. So I'm Kate Reed. I work as a drug-free communities project coordinator for Kankakee and Iroquois counties in Illinois. And I think it's important just to start with the why. Why is this work so important? I grew up in Nairobi, Kenya in East Africa. And just with seeing post-election violence and just so many experiences as a young child, I understood the effects of ACEs, but I never had the language for it. And then I moved, after I studied social work, I moved into a community that Oprah came to unveil America's poverty and drugs and violence, and that community became my family. And again, it just felt like okay, our children are bleeding, our people are bleeding, and we can't just look away. What can our community do to help stop this bleeding? So it wasn't that long ago, it was actually this week, about 2 years ago, that I heard Laura Porter just talk about the effects of adverse childhood experiences. And she said the quote that has stuck with me: "What is predictable is preventable." And that has really just been integral as we just think about what can we as a community do to join hands to stop this bleeding. One thing that I learned from Robin Sanger, who is the founder of Peace for Tarpon, and that was the first trauma-informed community, is she just really stressed to keep it as much of a grassroots initiative as possible. And so you'll see in our logo there, that's not our organization's logo. We were really intentional to make sure this is something that our community owns. So every community member from every sector, this is their initiative. It's not ours, but it's something that we need them to be a part of. And I think it's healthy for us to need. It's healthy for us to not have all the answers, to not have all the resources, because then both your diverse sectors as well as your community members with significant trauma experience, they're elevated as experts to help guide the process and to steward what it is that they have been entrusted with to make a difference in your community. So to be honest, we have a group of grandmas in our community who have made this their mission, and they are just working so hard behind the scenes to help us move this forward. And those are the community members that we're so proud of. We have trauma-informed yoga. We have hairdressers who are just working to learn how they can help people with what they've walked through. So everybody's playing their part across our community. And we launched Kankakee Iroquois Cares as a volunteer-driven coalition with the mission to build a trauma-informed community through raising awareness about the prevalence of trauma, the impact of ACEs, eliminating the stigma of shame, fostering that interagency collaboration, and expanding learning opportunities about trauma-informed services to build resilience in trauma. This was just 2 years ago. Let me tell you, it has taken off. We are so just encouraged by how our community has just ran with this. We were just selected for the National Leadership Academy for the Public's Health through the CDC and the Public Health Institute because of our work and working to build a trauma-informed community. The governor's office sent representatives to come and hear about just the ways that we're helping our children flourish. We were able to collaborate to get a large mental health grant because of our collaboration to build a trauma-informed community for millions of dollars to help us get our networks unified. So it's just been incredible to just watch our community members take the lead with this and just use what it is that they have in their hands to make a difference. If you'll go to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. With everything, we're always trying to partner with and learn from anyone else who is farther along in their journey to become a trauma-informed community. I was at a conference and just heard a woman casually say the words Trauma and Resiliency Summit. This was a few years ago. So you best believe I got her business card. And I didn't know her at all, but she just helped us out so much. She sent us the agenda for their event. She sent us just their publicity materials that we could use to help us craft ours. So I would just encourage you, help each other out, support each other all across the nation. That's why I love ACEs Connection, because it does give us that support group for each other. And so we had our first Trauma and Resiliency Summit. We brought in Laura Porter, and she just did an incredible job. And just the community buy-in was incredible. Just like Linda was saying, we very quickly reached capacity, both in terms of the number of hundreds of seats that we had available, but also in terms of the space on the bottom of our flyer for sponsors, because every organization wanted to be a part of it. All we did was just say, if you want to just donate $250 to help us, you can be a sponsor. It was the easiest ask. And that then led to us, we even were able to have a profit from the event, and we can use those funds to help us recognize organizations who are making progress towards completing the ACEs Connection 11 milestones to become a trauma-informed organization, as we celebrate them with organizations like the Chamber of Commerce. But we also stress that we want this to be a team initiative. So we didn't say, just bring your CEO and the people who sit around your board tables. We also wanted the people on the front lines, the direct care staff And we also wanted clients, community members with that experience so that they can be guiding these conversations. We had books to help people have like tools to leave with. Our panel members included like our gang experts, TheraPlay, ACEs Connection, like so many different organizations. And we were just really encouraged to see this just take off in our community. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So as we're trying to raise up an army, we think it's so important just to really equip our people with as much training as possible within whatever sphere of influence that they have. So we actually, in our small little county, we have more TheraPlay trained individuals than anywhere else in the world. And we've seen these nurture groups and sunshine circles just really make a difference in our schools. We have the trust-based relational intervention train the trainer model, and we've studied this, where we've had schools, districts start with this trust-based relational intervention, and then some doing the trauma learning overview, and then some not at all. And then we're comparing just the impact over the years. We have some really exciting pilot programs that we've started, our mental health first aid, and we have a specialized for our law enforcement, public safety, fire, emergency responders, higher education. We've got book studies going on just to build that community. Our Life Education Center reaches over 10,000 students every year with healthy lifestyle choices and social emotional learning, and to help prevent substance use, trauma, and those behavior incidences. So go to the next slide, please. So I would just encourage you, they say birds of a feather flock together. I would encourage you to be the bird that doesn't do that. Go to all the other flocks, learn their languages, their alphabet soup, their values, find the lead bird in that flock and help them to become your prevention champion and to bring the table to all collaborate together. So it's been so cool to see the different corners of our community getting on board with this. Our churches are adopting schools. We have church board members, school board members collaborating with listening sessions, mentoring, and they're supporting our teachers with self-care. We have our bars getting involved in this. We had Looney Bin Bar just did a really cool fundraiser to help some of our low-income students. We've had famous football players, Ted Peterson with the Steelers, Cleveland Browns, Indiana Colts. We've had Brandon and Michi Marshall with the Chicago Bears help us to put on some trainings. But then we've also been strategic, whether it's just the fast food restaurants, whether it's our United Way, our big systems, let's get them all around the table. And we're also reaching out across the state. So we have the Illinois Public Health Association Trauma-Free Illinois Initiative and the Illinois ACEs Response Collaborative. And then Ingrid with ACEs Connection has helped us to be able to equip our hospitals and health departments with the training that they need. So go to the next slide, please. We think it's so important to really know, are we busy or are we effective? We don't want to just be like an octopus on roller skates where we're just working, but we're not moving forward. We want to really see people's lives be changed. So we had our social work university students, they did a full continuum of care assessment to look at our pipeline for mental health services and find out where are we having duplications, gaps, and where do we just need more wraparound services. We've also partnered with the Erickson Institute. They're the premier early childhood development organization, and they're just committed to ensuring that all children have equitable opportunities to realize their potential. And it's just a hub of complex creative thinking that empowers adults to help children reach their fullest potential. And so they have been able to bring the newest scientific knowledge and theories of children's development and learning into just our education, our professional training, and our assessment as well. So that's been really exciting. We are always trying to not only spread this to different organizations, have them do the ACEs Connection milestones of a trauma-informed organization, but more importantly, the systems. Let's get it into all these different systems, into their action plans, so they're responsible to move this forward. And we're really seeing that happen. In conclusion, in Kenya, where I grew up, we say tuko pamoja, which means we are together. And that's really just the heartbeat behind this. That's how you launch it. Just get all your people together to join forces, and lives really are being changed from what's happening as we move from what's what's wrong with you, to not only what happened to you, but also what's strong in you and how can you then help our community flourish. And if anybody's interested in growing this movement in a new way, I'm so excited to hear that in Kenya, where I grew up, they're launching their first Trauma and Resiliency Summit. So if anybody's interested in your organization being a sponsor for that and helping to grow this in East Africa, I would love to reach out to you. But I just want to say thank you so much for the incredible work that you're doing on the front lines. You're making a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate and Linda, for sharing your stories. We're going to move now to Sissy White, and she's going to talk about Growing Resilient Communities GRC 2.0. She is our Northeast Community Facilitator here at ACEs Connection. Go ahead, Sissy.
Hi, everybody. And I just have to say, Kate, I don't know if you just coined what's wrong with you to what's strong with you, but I love that. And I am so inspired and I learned so much on these webinars. So I'm very grateful to be here. What I want to talk to you about today is one tool that's on ACEs Connection that I think is fantastic, and I just want to make sure you're fully utilizing it. So this is Growing Resilient Communities 2.0, and Jane Stevens, who is our founder of ACEs Connection and the publisher of ACEs 2 High, calls this a consumer guide to growing resilient communities, and it's fantastic. So I'm going to walk you through it a little bit. I'm going to use slides, but if you have a mobile device and you want to follow along on your phone and see, I just want to show you how to use it. Next slide, please. So on our ACEs homepage, as always, on the left-hand side, the information is newest information that's posted by you, our members, as well as by our staff, is always up on the top left-hand side in a rolling blog. On the right-hand side is our widgets, and that's static content, all really important, really great information on how to utilize our site. Next slide, please. Growing Resilient Communities. So on the far left, you see a rolling feed of what our homepage looks like, and then there's a bunch of widgets. So 7 widgets deep, which is a lot of scrolling. 7 widgets deep, you will find Growing Resilient Communities 2.0, and that's what I'm going to take you through a little bit today. So right in the middle of the page, there's information about the tool, and then in addition, there's information on how to reach the community facilitators here at ACEs Connection who can help connect you to information and resources as well as other community managers, because as you can see, every community has a unique story and is learning amazing things. So some part of our job is helping you learn about that, helping them share it back out to the network so others can learn, and then sharing it with you and making introductions. So we're also a resource, but back to Growing Communities, Resilient Communities 2.0, I want to show you the tool. Next slide, please. So when you're in the tool itself, there's 2 hyperlinks, and both are really important. The first hyperlink is going to take you to the graphic. So the graphic, which will pop up when you hit click here for interactive graphic, will bring you to this framework that Jane Stevens developed. And again, after 7 years working with now 300 communities as a science journalist, as a writer, as the founder of this organization, she's been able to cull what she's learned from lots of different communities. And again, we fully understand all communities are different, and there's things that we've never thought of and communities are doing that are amazing, and they're sharing back. So this is always dynamic, but we also want people that are just starting out to know they're not starting from scratch, and there's some things that communities and initiatives have in common and that have found to be effective. And so we've sort of, it's not linear, it's not like A through Z checklist. There's no, cookie cutter kind of way to do it, but there are things to learn, and we want to share some of those. Next slide, please. So within the slide itself, and Jane Stevens, everything that's in the slide is accessible on ACEs Connection through this graphic. So I'm not going to go into detail about every little thing, but I just want you to know how interactive it is. So within each part of educate, engage, activate, and celebrate, which are really the 4 core phases that Jane defines, and people do not necessarily go to them in order. Some communities start out in a very celebratory mode, from what's wrong with you to what's strong with you, and taking action from that place. Some people are wanting to learn more about the impact of adversity, don't know about it. That's brand new. Every day somebody's just learning about ACEs and how trauma has impacted us, our communities, our families, and what we can do to impact ourselves, our communities, and our families, and our systems. So when you're in one of these phases, you might be looking at one particular thing. How do I get speakers? How do I become a trainer? How do I get training? Where can I find presentations? In each different aspect of educate, engage, activate, and celebrate, there's different phases. So depending where your initiative's at, just click on one of these words, a pop-up will appear, and it will lead you to more information, as well as hyperlinks, which give you information. So like Jane Stevens herself, there's kind of layers upon layers upon layers of knowledge that you want to dig into and cull from. So next slide, please. So again, if you are in develop policy, there's information, there's resources, there's links that can be helpful to you. If you're in any stage, so that's what we mean by the interactive graphic. I have to admit, I did not know at first interactive meant each word was interactive, and if you popped on it, you find stuff. So I really go out of my way to show this tool to people because there's so much in it. Next slide, please. The second part I want to show you is Growing Resilient Communities 2.0 is a blog post. This is probably could be a policy brief or a white paper, but it's an in-depth blog which just details all that Jane has learned and all we have learned and all we have learned from all of you and are still learning in a blog post. So if you like a linear style of reading and learning and getting information, or you just want a big broad overview, I would go and read and explore that blog post several times. Next graphic, please. And that's where you're going to find out the framework that is established, why it has been established, why we've organized it this way. Next slide, please. And then we drill down on each of them. So next slide, please. And this is just detailing what is actually in the blog post itself. This is a tiny portion. So in each section in Educate, you might find information about a speakers bureau, what kind of content is going into flyers and presentations, where to find presentations. Are you going to have ACE Interface come in? Are you going to do a train the trainer model? Are people creating their own presentations and sharing out? Are you building a team? What content can you find freely available and online to customize? As Kate was saying, you know, you don't have to start from scratch. You can learn from what others are doing, and people are great about sharing resources and information. Same thing with presentations. All of this information is also available in our resources center, but your community facilitator can help point you to stuff too if you're looking for stuff. But the best place to start, I would say, is this Growing Resilient Communities 2.0 interactive graphic and blog post. Next slide, please. So again, it just talks about what ACEs science is, what do we do with this information? I mean, always communities say, now what? People learn about it and now what? And so that's an important question, and that answer is very different for different communities, what people do with this information and how they use it. So these are just some examples, ways to get training, information. Next slide, please. And back into the interactive graphic, I just want to point your attention to, if you are brand new to this movement, if you're a passionate individual and you are not part of an initiative yet, but you feel that calling and you're like, I know I want to do something, I want to do more, but I haven't necessarily been in doing cross-sector collective impact work. I haven't been doing community organizing. I haven't been part of this movement. You know, there's a place for you, and there's information and tools and places you can learn. So in this blog post, next slide, there's a beginner's guide at the very bottom about how to organize your initiative. And that's a lot of the stuff that Ingrid was talking about in the very beginning, about mission statements, logos, just organizing meetings, making sure to have cross-sector representation, but not just people that work in the community, but people that live in the community, families, community members, everybody partnering together right from the beginning so that it's truly a representative and community effort. So there's information in organizing your ACEs initiative that's also really useful, that gives sample minutes, sample agendas, sample form letters. So, you know, there's a lot of support for you if you're just starting out. And again, your community facilitators here are here to help you, to introduce you to others, to help you locate people in your area and region who might also be looking to do something, don't want to do it alone. And like Linda said, I think one of the pitfalls that a lot of people have is that they are trying to do it all on their own. And that's a heavy lift. And I think starting in the beginning and really taking your time to build a community and a core group that helps spread and spread and spread. And that is not a way a lot of us have worked and operated, but so taking the time to do that, finding support from other community managers and other members of ACEs Connection is really going to help you have a sustainable long-term initiative. Robin Sanger also talks about that. You know, it's not work that's done in weeks or months. It's years and decades. And so we don't want to take it on ourselves. We want to work together. That's part of the healing, and it makes it more effective. Next slide, please. So again, just there's lots of great information in organizing your ACEs initiative. Next slide. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to detail all because I really want to make time for there to be questions for the great community managers we have the chance to speak with. Next slide. But there's a ton of information for people just starting out getting your initiatives going. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So all of this wonderful information is accessible through the Growing Resilient Communities 2.0 graphic that's on the right sidebar of ACEs Connection. You can access it, the very beginner stuff, at the bottom of Growing Resilient Communities 2.0, the blog post we just looked at, which has all the information for organizing your initiative. And then you can also get it through the interactive graphic, which is a little bit more just kind of pick the topic that you're most interested in as relates to where your initiative is at right now. Next slide, please. And then the last thing is, we're a team here of community facilitators, and we're here to support your work. We're here to support you individually. If you're like, I don't want to get so many emails, how do I change my notifications? I need to learn how to do that, or how do I add my profile picture? And we're here to help introduce you to how initiatives have operated, how people get trained, where to find speakers. We have a new speakers bureau. We're here to help share what other communities have done to organize initiatives. The last story I wanted to tell was when I first started here, there were two women in New Hampshire. One was a mom. She had a high ACE score, and she was also doing a graduate program trying to figure out what would be an effective way to help reach other parents so that they knew about ACEs before they were parents, which was something she wished had happened to her. And then she found this other woman in her community on ACEs Connection. Even though they lived within a half an hour of each other, they found each other online, and they decided to do an online screening of resilience. I mean, a screening of resilience in their community. So when they first started, they were hoping to get 40 to 80 people to show up at the library. In the first day, they sold out. 80 people signed up, so they decided to do a crowd-sourced fundraising campaign on Facebook and ACEs Connection, and they raised enough money within 3 days to have a movie theater host the resilience screening, and they showed it to 400 people. And so that was the very first thing they did. And that was just, they don't know exactly what they're gonna do next. They're individually doing a ton, but they just wanted, their mission was, we wanna get the community together to have a conversation, and we wanna start talking about and acknowledging that ACEs impact our community, and we want everybody to be part of that conversation. And because they worded the flyers and information that way, they got an enormous turnout. And then they found all these nonprofits that own resilience that had had trouble getting people to screenings because they were done in small locations and not accessible to the community. So I just think we can learn so much from other communities and what each other is doing, and try all the different things to learn from each other. So next slide, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Sissy, for sharing the tool with everyone who's watching. And again, thank you so much to Kate and Linda for sharing your stories. So now we're going to open it up for questions. And I have a question for you, Linda. Is there anything that, because a lot of times when we talk about the process, we kind of leave out what we didn't do well, or what we wish we had known when we were getting started. Is there anything that you think was an area of opportunity for you getting started, for your initiative?
Well, listening to what Sissy had to say about, taking your time. When you say initiative, I'm thinking of getting the ACEs site up and going, because I think the other things we've done, we did, pretty well. Responding to the demand for screenings and hosting our conference and all of that. But when we were approached by Jane and Elizabeth, we just jumped in and said, we'll do the statewide site since there was nothing there. So we didn't have a group of people to kind of help with that. That ended up being just me. And there is a part of it that's the technology part, that some people aren't as comfortable with just the whole technology piece, which I am. So in hindsight, if we had had time, but we also timed it with the opportunity at our conference to let people know we were going to roll it out. So we had, and that we would send them the information when we had it. So we probably in some ways got a little bit of the cart before the horse, but given the way things fell, I don't think I would do it any different. I would have been able to do it any differently. Does that make sense? So now I'm rounding up, now I'm ready to round up a team and say, help me with this.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I can understand. So having a lot of support with the online initiative is very important, and because it can be time consuming for sure. Let's see, we have another question. So who decides on posts and blog posts on the ACEs 2.0 site? And so Sissy, can you answer that question?
I can. So ACEs Too High is edited, and it's a solutions journalism site. Jane Stevens is the editor. There are staff writers, and that is edited and goes through a normal, journalism editing process. Some of the content that is on ACEs Connection is put on ACEs Too High, but there's also great information on ACEs Connection, and everybody who is a member can post and add stories, resources, videos. And we really invite you to do that. Some of that sometimes ends up on ACEs Too High, and some of that is, by assignment, and trying to highlight and show what all different sectors are doing and what all different individuals are doing.
Okay, thank you. And I think also for you, Kate, I wanted to ask the same question. What are some things that you wish you had known, or if you could go back and do things differently, what would it be?
I definitely agree with Linda. I think sometimes our own capability can be like a hindrance. And we're like, oh, I'll just work extra hard. I'll do it myself. No, any chance that you can allow somebody else to do it, again, to elevate them, that they're the expert. I think that even though it's slower, a little bit more messier, it won't always be as efficient as just doing it in-house. I think that's where you really see the community difference. And as we were just reflecting, it wasn't that long ago that our community was voted the community that was the worst to live in America.
Wow.
And because we had the most murders and things. And now this last year, we were the #1 area, the #1 metro area for year-over-year growth. And so I think it's just because of these different community members and them stepping up as leaders, everybody having to play their piece in the puzzle to really make a difference and just to learn from each other.
Okay, thank you. Next thing, Sissy, can you tell everyone about the screening that we have coming up here on March 21st?
Absolutely. So we have a screening for all ACEs Connection members of Broken Places, and you can sign up and register. And we're really excited about this because we know how powerful movies have been for gathering communities. for educating, and for having, especially when combined with community cafes, world cafes, for getting just people connecting to one another. So this is an online screening of Broken Places, which if you haven't seen it, it's fantastic because it has a lot of information about how ACEs impact people, but it also has the people that are impacted by ACEs speaking, and you see them both as teenagers and children as well as adults. You see them as younger parents as well as 15 years later. So it's unusual in that it has a retrospective component to it that's really fantastic. So the screening is free. You'll be able to watch all day Thursday. There'll be a Twitter chat on Thursday night. The hashtag is Broken Places and ACEs Science. And we'll have some guests. We'll have people from the Center for Youth Wellness. We'll have people from ACEs Connection. We'll have community managers, because community managers are the heart and soul of what we do. We'll have community members. So we encourage everybody to sign up and register for that. You just have to register and you'll be able to watch that, and then think about if this is a film you want to add to your repertoire for helping and supporting your community.
Okay, perfect. So now we have one last question. We have this from Monica. Monica is asking for some feedback when it comes to her first ACEs summit. I believe it's going to be in New Hampshire. And so she asked, can you suggest an effective call to action that people can leave with from the summit? So let's start with you, Kate. What would your call to action be?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it's so important to help people move from that aha to action. We all get excited about, okay, we're going to be trauma informed, but now what are we going to actually do? So that's one question that when we brought Laura Porter in, I asked her that. I was like, okay, Laura, tell me, like, what do we do? If you would prioritize like these top 3 things for people to do, what would they be? And she's like, I'm not doing that. And that was a perfect thing for her to say, because she's like, your community, like at the end of the summit, I'm not the expert with the answers. Your community now is the one that has to come up with the answers. And we say what, like, local problems require local solutions. So the way she closed our summit with was a time of sharing out, just people just to speak. We had, hundreds of people there, but we just had the microphone going around, and for people to just stand up and say, okay, this is what's on my heart and this is what I want to do. And then other people say, I want to join you in that. I can help with this. And so it started out with, small things. Maybe it's popsicles in the park with police, or just like whatever it is that they can do. And then tracking that. So we had like a time for them to write out what their action steps were that they were going to do. And then we would post that on our site. And we, like, every week we would do, I think it was on like Thursdays, we would share those action steps and share people's takeaways and what they were going to do to really make a difference in this area. And then other people would support them and say, hey, I want to be a part of that. I'll come to your event and I can contribute pop or whatever. So just finding what they can do is really exciting.
Thank you, Kate. What about you, Linda? What would your suggestion for a call to action be?
Well, I'm going to kind of just echo what Kate said, because that's exactly what we ended up doing at our summit last year. Ours was sort of a 101, so yours was a little bit more in the planning side, but we went around with the Q&A at the end. We had people stand up, and a lot of them just talked about, I'm out and, wherever, and my school, and we need some help, and I'm willing to work with anybody, and but at the end, people came up and partnered. We had a community health care provider come up and tell one of the principals. She said, I'd be glad to come and help do some screenings at your school. So one thing led to another, and they actually screened 400 early childhood kiddos from pre-K 4-year-olds through 2nd grade for vision, for dental, for, they had behavioral health people in a room, and people had the opportunity to do, parents had the opportunity to do the ACEs survey, as well as our protected factors survey. And depending on how they scored, they could go ahead and schedule behavioral health with behavioral health providers. So it's just continuing to build those networks, but you have to encourage people that we've got to keep the message going. Talk to people who haven't seen the film, have them contact us and we'll come to them and show it. We literally will show it in our office here for one person if that's what it takes. So I talk to your legislators. You know, we talk a lot about, because we're connected with our policymakers, we talk a lot about, you know, a lot of these require some policy changes, and don't be afraid to let your legislators know, and tell them you're watching how they vote. So those would be my suggestions. Don't let them leave without a challenge.
Thank you so much, Linda. And as far as me and Sissy go, our call to action is going to be to join acesconnection.com. And so you'll see here, please join your local initiative. And if you're interested in starting your own, please contact the community facilitator in your area, and you can see them here. This is going to conclude our webinar for today. Our next one in April is going to be Becoming Trauma Informed. So that one is going to be very interesting. So I hope you join us. And thank you again for your time. Have a good rest of the day.